We are back on MorningLine. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. We're talking about the Syrian refugee crisis, the connection obviously to the United States, how we deal with this, the strategic importance of that region with what's happening, and how we can try to help these refugees make their way to someplace safe. With us this morning is Thomas Schwartz from over at Vanderbilt, professor there. Thank you for joining us this morning. It's an interesting conversation. We have some people that waited through the break. Let's get their take on this, and we'll go next to Paul. Hi, Paul.
Hey, good morning, Nick. How you doing, brother?
Good morning. What do you think, my friend?
Well, my friend, look, I'm going to put my own self in jeopardy of saying what I'm thinking to say, but I'm going to say it anyway, Nick. Look, this is a spillover effect. And all it is that a large part of this problem is what we created. Mm-hmm. All right, when we went over and invaded Iraq and took out Saddam Hussein, we created a power vacuum over there. People don't want to talk about this. Now, I know your Vanderbilt professor probably knows what I'm talking about. We created a power vacuum over there.
Yeah, you're right.
And that led rise to all these sectarian, radical groups trying to get power, gain power. That whole region was destabilized over there, and a large part of it was because of us. And we didn't make it better. We made it worse, Nick. I'm going to tell you something. That region has been in conflict since the beginning of times, right? It's not got any better. And we didn't gain any respect from them people. They already didn't like us anyway, Nick. We made it worse. And we killed, when we invaded Iraq, Nick, we killed hundreds of thousands of civilians over there that people like Joe and Philip don't understand we killed. Let me give you a prime example of how bad we made it for America over there. Okay, say Nick Barris was living over there. You had a job, you had a wife and kids. You didn't like America, but you hated Saddam Hussein too. All of a sudden you heard that America was coming over there. Well, you say, well, at least America's coming over here. I don't like them. They're going to take out Saddam Hussein anyway, and then they'll leave. Well, say you went off to work one morning, Nick, and one of our planes, which happened hundreds of thousands of times, accidentally dropped a bomb and killed your wife and kids over there. Mm-hmm. How are you going to feel about America then, Nick? Yeah. You're going to wish we'd never come over here, and you'd have rather kept Saddam Hussein with you.
Well, you do hear about that aspect of it. I don't want to get too far astray here, Paul, but he makes an interesting point, and the two of us were actually talking about it. I looked at the professor and said, well, Saddam Hussein, and there's no question, that left a vacuum, and we heard people talking about it. I still remember the famous lines from Colin Powell: you break it, you own it. And we broke it. And revisionist history now, but you could make the argument that we'd be better off today if Saddam was still there and we didn't have to deal with what I see as being even worse, ISIS, because let's just not forget, they never found weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. They never did. That's a whole other show, folks, but a lot of what Paul says is true. Now, that whole concept, though, you touched on it. A lot of what's happening here is maybe because of our inaction. Could that be because we looked at what the heck happened in Iraq, and now 2020 vision, we're like, geez, we don't want the same thing happening in Syria.
No, I think in part this is the problem, is that we ended up, we did go in, and as the caller said, we created a power vacuum. We tried to deal with that, and there was some degree of lowering of the level of violence by 2010 when we finally withdrew. But we withdrew, and we really withdrew. We got out of the region, and in effect, we left another power vacuum.
Yep. Right.
The flip side of saying that we shouldn't have done Saddam Hussein, which again is in retrospect a pretty compelling point, is that if you do it, you have to own it. You have to stay. Right. And we decided not to stay for valid reasons, maybe, but we also then created another vacuum, which has contributed to what's happening now.
Excellent point. I always felt that was a mistake. It was a mistake. Hindsight's 20/20, though, folks. I thought it was a mistake back then. Let's go to Tom. Tom, good morning.
Good morning, Nick.
Hey, Tom, what's on your mind?
I'm a veteran, and I do have compassion. Trust me, I do.
Sure.
But the thing with these refugees and all these illegals that's in America now, they have right to better health care and housing and everything, and we got millions of veterans living on the streets. The VA blocks up 20 to 30 people to one doctor in 1 hour, so the medical care for our American soldiers is destroyed. the housing, they're homeless. And before we think about refugees, how about treating our veterans better? Thank you.
Thanks for your call. I knew that some calls along those lines would come up, certainly with Donald Trump and some of the rhetoric going on in the campaigns now, you know, illegals and you know, immigrants coming to this country. Someone's going to bring this up and say, all right, now again, these are refugees. They're fleeing a dangerous situation. How do you frame out what he said with regard to that?
Well, there's no question that that's going to be an issue, that in effect, anyone coming to this country, it'll immediately create the question of why don't we take better care of our own citizens.
Mm-hmm, sure.
I mean, in fact, of course, you know, the abuses or the problems of the Veterans Agency should be addressed, and you know, they have to be addressed, and there's no question that veterans deserve better treatment than they've received. I think that has to be at least kept a little bit distinct from what's going on with these refugees, in the sense that I think you've got a very desperate humanitarian problem here that you want to address and you want to do something about. I think you want to do both.
And in your mind, there is a distinction between refugees and those undocumented immigrants that may come into the country?
Well, it's complicated, but because I think there's a lot of the people who are actually trying to get into Europe now are also for economic reasons. I mean, there are refugees, and those refugees often originally went to countries where their situations were not very good. They're trying to get into Europe for economic reasons. They'd like to come to America. It would be a haven for them both as refugee, but it would also because of the economic and other opportunities here. It's never really as black and white as it could be pictured. I think in Syria you do have reasons for people to flee, but many of the refugees that are now trying to go into Europe are actually coming from more repressive and economically uncertain countries in the region as a whole. So you've got people coming from Eritrea, from Libya, from Iraq. There's people coming from the Balkans. So it's not quite that distinct, but I think there can be a stronger case made for the refugees as opposed to those who are coming for economic reasons.
Gotcha. All right, let's go to Greg. Greg, good morning.
Hey, good morning, guys.
Hey, Greg.
This is a real broad subject. I mean, there's so many problems with all of this. I just kind of look for the main cause of these problems around the world in our country. It's our government. It's these leaders of these countries, and that's plain and simple. Our government is dysfunctional. It's not even taking care of our own citizens here in our country. It goes to other countries and spends hundreds of millions of dollars, and when we leave it in nothing but a shambles. And this is just a result of of our United States government getting involved in things that they should never be getting involved with. Our Constitution states that our government is only to defend our borders and our citizens. Our job is not to go around the world being the policeman of the world. Our job is not to go take out Saddam Hussein. The citizens of those regions are in charge of their own countries. Our government is nothing but organized crime, and they want to put their mob leaders in the parts of the world that they want to control. That's why we're all about Iran. It's because we don't have someone that we have in charge of that part of the world. That's what the problem is. Our government is out of control. It's dysfunctional. It's nothing but organized crime. The media is completely controlled. This presidential election is nothing but a show for the public. They've already decided Jeb Bush is going to be the president. I mean, that's a no-brainer. We're going to see this big debate tonight with a whole bunch of idiots standing up there shooting their mouths off, saying a bunch of nothing that they have no intentions of doing because they have to do it. So, yeah. I mean,
all right.
This is just the result of a government that is stepping way beyond its bounds, that should never, ever be doing any of this stuff. Sorry.
Okay, listen, fair enough. I mean, I agree to the sense that this country, like most countries, don't do anything unless there's some kind of self-interest involved. Now, I don't know that there's self-interest involved in helping these refugee families. What do you think of what he says in terms of getting involved? And you've heard the phrase before, the United States, the policeman of the world. Is it our fault that we didn't intervene in Syria and this is happening? Why is that our job?
Well, I think foreign policy often results you're damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Yeah.
We took action in Iraq. We created a power vacuum. We decided afterwards that we wanted to remove ourselves. We don't think that. That doesn't mean that conflict doesn't spill over borders. Borders are lines on a map. They're not anything that people can be forced across them. Hardship, human misery doesn't stop at borders. And one of the issues is you might want to not be involved in the rest of the world, but the rest of the world will get involved in you. Isolationism has never quite worked for the United States. It would. I think it's something we like to comfort ourselves and think that we were safer back then, but it's not really true.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And the United States, like it or not, is often looked upon because of who we are to get involved in some of these issues. All right, listen, we've got to take a break on that note. When we come back, more of your calls right after this.